Hello there, Isa here, back with another video. Today I'm going to talk about the unfortunate circumstances that PSO2NGS is stuck with at the moment. Recently we have a new patch and well, I guess it's a little bit controversial, but it's probably the same thing that's going on with a lot of, you know, MMORPGs or just MMO-like games that have progression issues concerning their gameplay elements. Well, you see, PSO2NGS is not exactly the hard game per se. It's more like the effort for you to actually gear up. It's quite a lot, requires a lot of resources, and usually a lot of new players, they don't really like play the game consistent enough to actually earn enough resources to kind of grind for the materials and the stuff that is required for you to get the BIS weapons or best in slot weapons. And a lot of people always have this like view that the weapons and gears in this game it just doesn't really matter that much, because eventually the developers will definitely going to hand out free gear. Yep, catch up gear mechanics, right? So catch up gear is not exactly bad in certain ways if they are being implemented, but the fact that the catch up gear's armor and the weapon is almost surpassing my painstakingly difficult to build weapon sometimes just demotivates a lot of players, unfortunately. And it's not to say that the gamers should grind like crazy just to have a little bit more power for their attacks or to have higher crit numbers to see, like sure, our monkey brain loves some huge numbers, but in the end, the more DPS you do in this game, the more that you can clear something, and that's it. Because this is just a PvE game, right? It does not matter if you have like, not exactly the best potency in terms of like damage and stuff like that, but as long as you are able to keep up and you are still able to contribute damage, you can actually contribute enough that you can maybe push the boss clearing time down at least several seconds or even a minute. That is actually decent enough for a lot of players. While there is also the potential of grievers who don't really upgrade their gears at all and just try all methods of loopholes trying to get around this issue. It's unfortunate that the game has to resort to this. Sure, we have weapons that are now mostly upgradable or have a future upgrade path that is kind of much more meaningful in comparison to like the previous patches in the past, I suppose, because this time around a lot of the rare weapons or the ones that actually are doing decently at the top of the leaderboards are usually all upgradable and are, well, much more future-proof than you might think. So for example, recently we can actually upgrade your Leon weapons, you can upgrade your Legendios weapons, you can also upgrade your 12 weapons, which previously there's nothing that is actually related to like upgrade path for them, but now you have them, so you can actually use those older weapons now and have some meaning to them, unlike a lot of other weapons in the past where there's no meaning at all to get those weapons unless replacing them at all. If you have an acrocellular weapon or if you have an iron weapon that is fully kitted out, you can actually transfer to other weapons for free as well, which is actually a good thing. Unfortunately, that is only for that one weapon, sadly. It's not exactly applicable for all weapons. That's why, the developers unfortunately had to give out this handout free gear, which is already the third epic weapon, I suppose. It's decent enough for you to try to, progress in certain contents that you don't really have enough BP before, and certainly very good for new players who just recently played the game and wanted to enjoy it fresh on a new account or a new character. And it's sort of a hard line for them to balance, because unfortunately there isn't only that much players in this game left. And I don't really think a lot of people are going to just say this game is at the best state it has ever been. Yes, in terms of QOL, in terms of like content wise, yes, the game is probably in a much better state compared to the launch, but unfortunately, I think my conclusion leads all the reasoning into that the developers just don't really have proper tools to innovate the game further on than this. So we already have rotations for the game since, I don't know, Alio to Retem to Quarries and then finally to Stia for quite a long time already, and we are currently still repeating that same thing again, but only in instances and maybe some changes and into outer realms and maybe some dual quests here and there, and maybe adding some Ruin Dark Falls bosses as well, which is actually just reskins of PSO2 bosses. It's not bad per se, but it's pretty obvious that this is like literally a huge limitation for this game. I don't really think games, especially free-to-play live service games, are sustainable if they were to focus on just this. I don't really think people should be limited to just playing repeatable contents like this. I don't really think that's that good. In comparison to a lot of other live service games that's coming out recently, you can say that the content that you are able to consume is just way lesser than a lot of other free-to-play games, especially on the mobile side. And that's very, very unfortunate because PSO2NGS is supposed to be a console and a PC game, and there's not going to be a mobile port anytime soon unless they decided to do that somehow. While they have their Japanese side having that old game that's called PSO2ES still existing, their newer attempts of mobile games are just not successful. Because what people wanted from Phantasy Star at the moment is a sci-fi genre element, the spacefaring, the lore, the story of the characters. I think all those things are always have been part of Phantasy Star, even on the first Phantasy Star Online, and even from the first of Phantasy Star RPG series back in the Sega Genesis days, I guess. It's just very unfortunate, however, that the developers just don't really want to expand the IP further than just being letting it just stagnate in Phantasy Star Online 2 Neo Genesis. I mean, kudos to the fashion designers. I don't really think they are at fault here. They are doing their best to design whatever cool costumes they can just to monetize the game and make the game constantly, still actually monetize fine. That's why the servers are still up for almost maybe 4 years or more already at this point. I don't really think a game is considered as dying if they were to be online and staying consistent on this 1K number, sometimes even reaching less at lower peak at times. But I think the fact that the game is being so casual and being so non-formal for the most part, except for maybe AC scratches or collaborations, but I don't really think this game is going to go anywhere in in the future at the moment, from where your eye can actually see and predict. It's just that I do wish there were more towards the Phantasy Star series than just this game here. There were a lot of side games in the past that they should revisit, like Phantasy Star Nova. It was like a side game for the PS Vita. I think that was actually pretty cool because it introduces a new weapon genre and a new class which is unseen so far since PSO2, and I wish that they at least expand upon that. Maybe creating a sequel would be really cool to see what happened in the time period of 1,000 years ago. Maybe even go to the prequel on what happened in base PSO2. I wish there was a much more stronger link and connection back to the original game instead of just plopping us 1,000 years in future for no reason. And yeah, there's a lot of other genres as well, like continuation of the original RPG series from Phantasy Star 1 to 5. Maybe there's a chance for Phantasy Star 6. Who knows, right? Maybe that is actually possible. Maybe a remaster of the original Phantasy Star Online, creating side stories or extra lore to find out what happened to the future of Pioneer 1 and 2, stuff like that. That actually is going to probably intrigue more people than like whatever we have at the moment in New Genesis, because it's just a way to save story now. I guess they could cook better stories in the future, but at this point, if the next story doesn't really arrive until like 6 months later, I'm not really that surprised anymore, because it is what it is. The tools they have and the budget they have is very limited. And unfortunately, Sega just don't really care of the Phantasy Star franchise at the moment, and I'm pretty sad of that. I always looked up to Phantasy Star as a child back then, and was pretty amazed by how, this game is able to compete against the likes of Final Fantasy, since even back then, and even pioneer the whole online on console thing. That wasn't a thing back then, by the way. Dreamcast with the original Phantasy Star Online was one of the earliest, console games that actually have a MMO-like experience for the consoles, when previously online games or MUDs or online RPG games are usually only limited to PCs back then, and they were the ones who actually normalized online gaming on consoles first before the rest of the other come in. So it is really, really unfortunate to see the situation of their games being this, in this like a weird situation here, a weird limbo of, they have very good creativity tools for you to enjoy as a gamer, but when you try to play for more gameplay related contents, you just find out that it's actually all the same, with maybe a little bit of a twists and turns here and there, but most of the time it's really just limited into different instances and different boss rotations and different enemy rotation and colors of enemies and types of enemies just being rotated around and around, and just with their values of their HP and attack changes, and that's it. It's not exactly a very innovating genre, and it's probably held back because of the profitability of the game is just not high, even with the Japanese whole Arcs Friendship Caravan and all those live appearances of the producer Hamazaki. It's just, I just wish there were more to just them doing this, especially for the global side of things. It's probably just unfortunate that they probably don't really have the resources necessary to expand the game further on. But hey, that's just what it is, unfortunately. So hey, I'm still gonna play the game, sure. I'm gonna play other games more because of the unfortunate situation of this game here. But abandoning this game is kinda moot point at this point, because if I were to abandon this game, a lot of people would be, sad about it as well, because I don't really want a lot of people who love this game genuinely for what it is for them to just suddenly just lose all their progress of 4 years in this game just because not much people are playing this game. I think this game is at the very weird stage of the executives are still liking and wanting this game to keep alive because of the monetization and the profitability of the game, but at the same time the player base, and when they look at the player base numbers in Steam, they probably also realize that the global side is not possible for them to revive anymore unless they take drastic action. What I hope for the future of Phantasy Star is that they would at least learn from their mistakes that is happening from the launch of NGS, and maybe try to adopt a much more easier to develop engine than what we currently have. If I'm not wrong, the current game, which is PSO2 New Genesis, is still using a legacy engine based on PSO2, hence why they can actually link both games together even if the NGS looks very, very new. So I wish they just, migrate to a much more newer architecture that is much easier and acceptable for a lot of game developers, so that they can innovate better in terms of what a live service MMO-like game could have been. Their combat systems, their balance, their free-to-play friendliness in terms of like not just their gameplay, but also their cosmetics side is really something that a lot of other games just don't have. The ability for you to cosplay as any other characters, the creative spaces that has allow a lot of players to create amazing scenery that people wouldn't expect to be seeing them in other games to be created is amazing, and I don't really want their efforts to just disappear just like that, just because the game is not profitable anymore. I wish the game can go further than this, and that is my genuine reaction. I do not want the game to just fail because I'm on copium or anything. It's just more like I'm a fan of the series. I don't really want to see the whole Phantasy Star IP just being limited into this live service slop kind of a style game, that a lot of mainstream people or majority of people are gonna complain about. But I would rather them to revisit the single player Phantasy Star style games in the past, and maybe make sequels of those games as well, because it has more history than just being Phantasy Star Online. I mean, yeah, that's what I hope for the future, and I guess that's all I wanted to say about Phantasy Star Online 2 at the moment. I just wish that, the developers are actually cooking something in behind the scenes that we don't really know, and once they announce it, hopefully the game would be revitalized again. But until then, I'll be playing this game still and maybe make some videos on it here and there, but it's not going to be that serious, unfortunately, because of these, same issues being brought up again and again. I'm the kind of gamer who don't really want to repetition. I don't really exactly like repetition. Hence, playing this game is pretty ironic for me, but it is what it is. I just want the game to be a better example instead of just being stagnating. That's all. So those are just my review, and I hope to see you guys next time then. Please leave a like and subscribe if you like my content, and I'll see you guys next time. Sayonara.